In this video, which I'm for some reason again filming outside, even though it's 48 degrees and stuff is happening on my lawn. I'm going to be talking about the longest car trips I've made that we took in a certain length of time. So, really long day trips, really long one-night over trips that go, really far, and what I think the maximum extent for what a day trip or what a one-night trip, really can feasibly be. So, first of all, I live on Long Island, but I'm going to have to mask my exact location in this video, because I can't have you knowing exactly where I live. And obviously, if you don't know exactly where I live, that's going to distort all my distances. So, I'll just make it close. We'll do like Syosset, which again, I don't live in Syosset, but you can't really know where I do, because that would be disturbing. And from my house, we've made it to New Jersey in a day several times. My cousins used to live in Morganville, which is in New Jersey, and to get there on the southern route, because we usually take this route, hour 36 minutes as of right now, it's a 78-mile drive. So 78 miles to get to Morganville. I remember they used to live in Princeton, New Jersey, so we used to have to take, a trip that now they haven't shown the South Shore route. So I don't know how this is going to look if we drag this all down. And I have this really annoying extension that, can I drag it back into the highway? I can. Hour 56 minutes though, 92 miles to get to Princeton, New Jersey, which is further from us than Morgantown. And now they actually live in Boca Raton, so no more visiting on day trips. But you get my point. We made a trip out to New Jersey several times for, that purpose. But that's not the farthest I've pushed on a day trip. That's not the actual farthest. Because one time on a day trip, we made it to Hartford, Connecticut. This is right before COVID. I went to see some of my second cousins who lived in Hartford, Connecticut. Without traffic, it's 2 hours and 3 minutes. And this isn't even where I live. This is where I say Syosset. 125 miles. That's crazy on a day trip. And that's factoring in no New York City rush hour traffic, which you're almost always going to get. Again, in Brooklyn there's traffic, but not in the Bronx. So, nice change, but not very reliable. Usually it's going to be a lot worse than this, I think. We also went to Danbury on a trip for a college tour, specifically for the Western Connecticut University, which I wound up applying to, but visiting anyway. That's an hour 25 minutes, and that's a 79-mile drive up. So again, comparable to something like Princeton. But that's not quite the farthest day trip that I've done. Farthest from where I live, yes. Because from where I live, we don't venture that far on day trips. But not in total. Because what you have to understand is that I've been on trips before where we've made it very far between places. So first of all, you have Sedona, although I didn't sleep in Sedona. Slept in, what hotel was it that we slept on? It wasn't actually Sedona. I think it was the village of Oak Creek. And then we went to the Grand Canyon National Park on a day trip. So that was an hour 58 minutes. Notice though, 130 miles. It's further because again in Arizona, you can drive a lot further on these roads. And it wasn't just that. The crazy part is that we then went down to the southwest to Prescott Valley on that same day trip. So we went from the Grand Oak Creek to the Grand Canyon to Sedona to Prescott Valley and then back to Oak Creek in a single day. That's crazy, but for the rest of the video, the longest trip was to the Grand Canyon, hour 58 minutes. So that was pretty crazy. And, you know. So, that was a pretty long day trip on one of my camp trips. Then you have to be careful, though. You have to start and end in the same spot. If you don't start and end in the same spot, then obviously it cannot be counted. So, it's got to start and end in the exact same spot. Or else, obviously it just can't be counted. Just can't be. Because that would be unfair. And a lot of the camp trips, we don't spend the night in the same place because we're constantly moving, trying to get to our next destination. Which annoys me, but as long as that's the reality, that's the reality. One where we didn't stay, though, was Seattle. The two places we took extensively long day trips. One of them was to Vancouver. And this is where we sort of learned you can't go internationally on a day trip because, look, it's 2 hours and 43 minutes to go down on a day trip. 230 kilometers, which converted to miles, because I generally use miles in this video, even though I don't like using miles personally, but 144 miles. And then plus multiple hours possible at border security. That was certainly a pain in the ass. From Seattle, we also then went down to Portland, Oregon on a day trip, which was 2 hours and 42 minutes and 174 miles. Longer, but again, it's a less trafficked route to go south from Seattle than to go north from Seattle. So, that trip was probably the longest day trip ever. There is something I want to check, though, because we once stayed in a hotel in Williamsburg, and then went to the first flight airport in the Wright Brother, site in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, or actually Kill Devil Hills. But that was 2 hours and 14 minutes and only 125 miles. So again, Seattle to Portland does take the cake as the longest day trip that I've ever done. Obviously, it's not based off of where I live, because then it would be from where I live to Hartford, Connecticut. But when you base it overall, you get that result. Now, I should be taking a trip from New Orleans out to Mobile, Alabama coming up, but I don't think it's going to take the cake as the longest. At only 2 hours and 3 minutes and 144 miles, it wouldn't. Certainly, it's long to go from Louisiana to Alabama on a day trip, and it will probably be the only one where it's a day trip where you cross multiple state lines on a day trip. Actually, no, it wouldn't be, because there's Pittsburgh through West Virginia into Ohio, but maybe the longest of two states that don't border each other, since you can't get to Louisiana from Alabama directly, whereas from Pennsylvania to Ohio, you obviously can. Nonetheless, I digress. I actually am curious, though. Urbana to Purdue University, would that wind up being longer? Because that was certainly a long trip, and it's 98 miles in an hour, 34 minutes. Had to check, though. And that was a day trip that I took. But nonetheless, still looking at, not so great results. So what if we extend this to one night now? Now it's anywhere where you can take a night out, but you still have to come back to the initial destination. So you can't just go out, spend a night there and then go somewhere. You have to go back to the initial destination. You have to. And from that, we can go to, from Syosset, again, close to where I live, to Hershey Park, which camp took us on a one-night trip. And Hershey Park wasn't even the extent of where they took us. They took us further. But Hershey Park itself is 3 hours and 21 minutes, and it's 202 miles. Yes, camp does insist on taking the George Washington Bridge, and we did take this way when we went to Hershey Park. But Hershey Park wasn't actually even the extent of where we went, because we wound up sleeping even further out in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, which is even further away by a pretty substantial distance. From Carlisle back to home is 3 hours and 45 minutes on a 221-mile trip. The trip back home, actually, I'm taking 4 hours and 45 minutes because it was Friday afternoon on the rush hour traffic. But certainly, it's better to go from Carlisle back home in 4:45 than to go from Philadelphia back home in 4:30. Obviously, this does exclude any trip that took one night that was closer. Like really anywhere in New Jersey that was a one-night trip is pretty much disqualified because of where Carlisle was. But now we can look at the University of Delaware, a trip that I recently took where we stayed from one night for a college, for a not college, an admitted student stay at the University of Delaware. Noting that we have to go all the way onto the southern route, even though it sucks, and that nobody likes it. And also, okay, I think my cursor's right. Yeah, it is. 2 hours and 57 minutes, 173 miles. But that does not beat out Carlisle. Newark, Delaware does not beat out Carlisle, Pennsylvania in terms of this. Now, we could look at Camp Pointel, which was a one-night trip. Obviously, in Pointel, Pennsylvania. That's 3 hours and 21 minutes, all right. Partially because for some reason, it's telling you to go this. Wait. What? It's in Pointel, Pennsylvania. Wait. I don't get it. I'm not taking the Southern State Parkway for this. Could Google Maps ever be less annoying? Okay. Oh my god, you've got to be kidding me. Like so there's about a mile dip on the Cross Island Parkway, which we didn't even take. So maybe if I shift it over to 295, I'll get better. So if I shift this back into 485, will I get any sort of... So if I do it this way, will I... Okay, there we go, thank God. Anyway, except for the fact I'm not changing Google Maps for like a 1 mile difference. Okay, 3 hours and 6 minutes, 166 miles to get from where I live to Camp Pointel in Pennsylvania. Although now that I remember it, we came home this way. We didn't actually get there this way. Getting there, we wound up going north through Hancock and then connecting it back down into Pennsylvania. This is the better way, and this is how we got home. You do spend a lot less time on New York Route 17 if you do it this way, but that was a day trip. That was 166 miles, which is actually less than our first one-night trip. So I hate to say it, but I think Carlisle wins it. I genuinely think Carlisle wins it. Now, 2 nights. 2-night trips are very interesting as to, where you generally go on a 2-night trip, I think. 2-night trips are very interesting as to where you go. I'm going to turn my camera off and go inside because, again, the 46-degree temperature is starting to get to me. So, Camp actually did once take a trip where we stayed at a La Quinta close to Richmond, if not exactly in Richmond. It was close to Richmond. And then we went to Charleston, South Carolina for 2 nights, and then went back to that same La Quinta in Richmond. So, by technicality, it counts. That's not an easy drive either. That's 5 hours and 52 minutes and 413 miles. And on the way back, we actually went to the Carolines theme park, which is on the border between Charlotte, North Carolina, and Fort Mill, South Carolina, in between the two states. So that most definitely doesn't make it any easier. But just the trip down and all that stuff is 5 hours and 52 minutes and 413 miles. And again, I'm really glad that it's the same spot. Because this was gonna be the longest, but if it wasn't the same spot, it was gonna be disqualified. So I'm really glad that again it held up. As for anything else, I can't really think of anything else because again, you gotta go, in between the same spot twice, which can get annoying. And it has to be 2 nights. Again, generally 2-night overnights don't take you very far. Obviously, we could do 3 nights, but at that point, it sort of eliminates a lot of the fun because it's like 3 nights, you can do pretty much like almost anything that you want to. And then you start getting into like where you can start to fly at 4 nights. And I think that at that point, it just ruins the fun. That's my opinion, but I think it ruins the fun at that point. So now we can actually do some of the longest driving we did by day. So this video, again, a lot of it was how far could you go on a day trip? And again, based on my findings, think 200 miles is the limit for a 1-night trip. You probably could go 300 even though I've never done that. For a 2-night trip, you got to figure you can really push that thing like 400, 500 miles on a 2-night trip. But that's probably about it. Now, for the longest distances driving in a day, the longest one might be from where I live around Syosset to Smithville, North Carolina. Very crappy hotel. But again, a very long drive. Now, our drive with camp, actually, I'm taking 10 hours because of traffic. You pass through several metropolitans like New York City, Philly, Baltimore, Washington. But it's 539 miles down, and it takes 8 hours and 12 minutes without really factoring in traffic. Because, again, not that much traffic on a Sunday night. Well, that's a lie, but not too much notable traffic. Then from Smithfield, we went all the way down to Universal Studios in Florida the next day. That was 8 hours and 19 minutes and 587 miles. But on a camp bus, it was less driving by like about a half hour. But it's actually further in reality. And, in a day, we were really able to push how far I can do by getting to Florida in 2 days. Which is obviously no joke. Now, there is a crash here that does slow you down, and I want to see how far it was from Smithfield back to Syosset. That would be 539 miles. So, yeah, 587 would beat that out. And it's probably the most I've ever driven in a day. But, knowing me, I want to check other possibilities and see first. Because Oak Creek, Arizona, we then stopped in Las Vegas. Then proceeded to go down to Victorville before the day concluded on a camp trip. This was pretty ambitious. First of all, it's 7 hours and 12 minutes and 489 miles. So that's certainly something in favor of how impressive it is. But also, take out Las Vegas, and then the raw distance between the two shrinks to 6 hours and 26 minutes and 430 miles. So certainly, Las Vegas is a bit out of the way. A bit. There's actually about the 6 hours and 23 minutes. That's 431 miles. That takes you by the Hoover Dam and into Nevada, but not at Las Vegas, which is a bit further north than I think most people think. I mean, again, it wasn't a huge difference, but you have to realize that going to Las Vegas certainly put us out of our way by a bit because of how far, Las Vegas is north off of routes like I-40. And again, Las Vegas is probably further north than you think. So that was certainly a long drive. And for a single day. And the West Coast trips generally didn't have long drives, but that was, I think, the one exception to that. Camp trips certainly did have long drives at times, though. But thinking of one that could have really rivaled 587 miles is tough to think of off the top of my head. Like, I'll be genuinely honest with you. It's tough to think about how far camp has pushed us at times. I think from Syosset then to Kalahari and Sandusky could be one of the biggest pushes that we've ever done. As that goes, 8 hours and 17 minutes along 538 miles, but not quite. Then, and it was actually the other way around, which would actually make it 8 hours and 42 minutes because, again, the traffic is probably worse going out that way. Tons of crashes, tons of traffic once you hit New York City. Now, what I'm also wondering is that the camp also then went from Toledo into Hershey Park for Chocolate World. And, or maybe it wasn't Toledo, but it was somewhere in the metro area. That's 6,039 minutes, but it's only 441 miles. That's all you get. And now I actually wound up backtracking into Chambersburg for the night, which is about an hour away, but I still don't think it really adds to it. Also, notice how far the way you're going if you're going to Hershey, but then you're going back to Chambersburg, which is practically Maryland at that point, if you realize how far south Chambersburg actually is. But there certainly have been extensive drives, from where we are into... I don't want to say we slept in Toronto because I don't want to do Toronto. But I can't figure out where this hotel was. Okay, don't want to say Toronto. Think Oakville, Ontario was where the hotel was. When I went to Oakville, Ontario, from here, that was also long because of how long it is to get up to that area. And I think we took I-90 the whole way. So just let me drag my marker. That would be 8 hours and 21 minutes and 533 miles. But again, not longer than 587, even though it's close. I know that from my house, we also went to Montreal on a trip to Canada once, but that's 6 hours and 54 minutes, and it's actually less when you just correct this, which I don't think we're capable of doing. So I'm going to have to leave this one off because Google Maps is just being annoying. I think 587 is the first I've driven in a day, and probably about the limit is how much you can drive in a day, because that involves a coach bus too. Like generally, if you're making rest stops, like we went, like our house, we went to Pittsburgh once, and that we said was the limit when you don't have a coach bus. That was only 407 miles and 633 minutes, yet that was probably the farthest that we could make it. Another contender is when we went to Williamsburg, which I know is closer than Smithville, but I want to make a point about how inconvenient it is to not have a bathroom. That's 6,031 minutes and only 416 miles. So, again, it's tougher when you don't have the luxury of having a bathroom on you. But hopefully this video does give you a bit more insight into how far you can drive in a day.